Tabletop Spotlight, brought to you by Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
Hey everyone, I'm JayArr with BoLS Souls, and welcome to Tabletop Spotlight. No, let me try that one more time.
It's all good.
Hey everyone, I'm JayArr. I know what I'm saying. Hey everyone, I'm JayArr with BoLS Souls.
And I'm Steven with Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
Welcome to Tabletop Spotlight.
Welcome indeed. I have something pretty special for you this week.
Oh yeah, what have you got?
I have the recently Kickstarter released Empires of the Void 2.
Oh,
this is
cool.
a sequel game to the first published game that Red Raven Studios released. That's Ryan Lacout's publisher. This thing is pretty beefy, and I'd like to dive right in.
Absolutely, I have to say it looks amazing. So let's dive in.
For sure.
Alright, so JayArr, I have the board set up, not fully prepared for setting down and playing, but I wanted to show off kind of the individual elements, because if we sat down and talked about everything, we'd be here all day. So I want to give a quick overview.
You know, I'm not opposed to.
For sure.
But, let's go through this.
Absolutely. So this is a 4X game. For those of you who are fans of like Twilight Imperium, that's definitely the genre we're playing within here. And I like how this board is a little more like truncated. There's not as many areas to conquer, which both forces you as a player to like have some conflict with your opposing players, but then also like the game's very heavily featuring the narrative of the planets that you're visiting.
Right, you were telling me that the designer Ryan Lacout, he's big on emphasizing the narrative. And
Yes.
how does that come into play in this game?
For sure. So the key thing is each planet has a different race that you can recruit once you've influenced the politics of that area, as well as a deck of cards that applies specifically to that planet. And these cards both feature as missions you may have to do or special actions that you can take. They also can double as firepower that you can add to combat. And because there are more planets than there are spots on the board, every time that you play will feel unique because of that, because these decks all get shuffled together to form our big action deck, which also acts as how much time is left in the game. As you guys are drawing up more cards, that is time ticking away.
Very cool. And then I see kind of at the top of the board, it looks like there's like a turn sequence or actions that you can
Yes, this is a action selection game. So if you are the active player, noted by this orange cylinder that gets passed around the table, you choose which action you would like to take, but you have to take a different action than what was previously chosen the last round.
Cool.
So let's say I want to research and build, then I will move the marker to there. Every player then can opt to either follow me on that action, or they can spend resources to take a different action, or they can opt to refresh their economy, both their cards that they have in hand, the command points that they have, which they can spend to take actions during their turn, and also gain resources from the planets and ships that they have at their disposal.
Very cool. It reminds me a little bit of Scythe, but I like that it kind of pulls all of the players along with whatever the action is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that also encourages a lot of like you're planning ahead, because you know you can't take the same action that your opponents took.
You have to make sure that you have a little bit of wiggle room with your abilities. So planning ahead so that you're not stuck with no economy left, which would then force you to take the scavenge action, which is functionally the same as just doing your refresh action instead of following your opponents.
Gotcha.
Is pretty significant. But let's dive in a little on like the board here. So we've got the ships set up on the open nodes. These are going to be your starting points. You randomly get to assign at the beginning of the game.
Sure.
And then you can spend command to move one space. When you run out of command, you then visit that planet. If it's not visited, you can place influence cubes there, which will give you victory points. You then get the resources applied to your bank, which you can then use these later for researching and developing your player board, so you get more of everything, more economy, more actions, more cards, whatever you need. And we'll show more about that in a bit.
Absolutely.
Each of these large planets feature both a space for players competing over influence. It features the unique race present on that planet that you can then recruit as fighters.
Let's hold one of these up so we can.
For sure, please. And feel free to move these resource chips off. Each
So-
board is separated into a in orbit and a on the planet. If you are in orbit, you're just like passing through, no big deal. If you go to the planet, the first time you go there, you will have to fight with the native populace. But then once you've gone through combat, you will get victory points and assign your influence cube there, which means you can then, if you are the leading player in influence on that planet, you can then actively recruit that as well as get the bonus for being allied with that planet.
Cool.
So
So visiting these planets seems fairly important, and it looks like this is that's the space for the decks of cards.
So it's more for the influence ships. The decks of cards all get shuffled together. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, easy, like weird thing that they give you that much space for, which makes you wonder like how much competing you have.
Absolutely.
But given the smaller board, that makes sense. It also offers space for, depending on the number of players, there will be the Sarkeen Regency.
I was
Not
just about to ask
how well
about
that
that.
works. So this kind of boxes you in based on the number of players, because you could visit here, but you will have to fight the Regency, and this gives me an opportunity to talk about combat. That number of dice is how many dice they roll in combat, and then they take the highest number that they roll. So your pool would be 6 here, you then take the highest roll that you get, which would be 6, I suppose. Your odds are pretty good of rolling that on 6 dice. And then you add that combat number, so you're probably dealing with somewhere between like a 13 and 15 on their total roll, which is going to
Sure.
be really hard to compete with, considering that most of the other races and like characters that you will recruit only have like a 1 or a 2 die that you can add to the pool.
Right. But I assume that there's more than just combat that kind of helps you win in this game.
For sure.
So why don't you take me through a little bit of what I'd want to do if I were trying to win this game?
Sure. Visiting the smaller planets and having influence on them will give you victory points. Victory points are counted up. You have a card in your hand at the beginning that you can use at any time to trigger scoring. So if you've spread yourself really thin and you know that other players are going to like start taking your spots, that'd be a good time to use that.
Sure.
Additionally, scoring is checked automatically. About halfway through the game, you shuffle in this scorecard into the deck, and that triggers scoring automatically. And then at the end of the game, scoring is dictated. So you have to make pretty meaningful decisions pretty quickly because there's only 2 times that scoring will actively be triggered for you.
Cool.
But then a lot of these cards that you get, I'll try and find a good example, give you influence automatically to the planets as well as just straight up victory points.
And let's go ahead and take a closer look at.
All right, JayArr. So you were asking about alternative ways to win, and I think a good way to show that off is the cards that you will be getting, as well as these Explore tokens that I've forgotten to mention. So these are placed at the beginning. They all got these pretty simple basic backgrounds. You put them on the planets at the start of setup, and when you first visit them, you get to flip it over. Some of them give permanent bonuses to controlling that planet. Some of them give you immediate bonuses. For example, like these mines will give you additional income if you control that area, whereas like these wormholes let you warp between other wormhole spots on the board.
Cool.
So that planet now becomes a mobile hotspot for moving around the board, which is neat. Some of them will give victory points and other things.
Right.
These cards come in a lot of different flavors. I've pulled out a couple. Let's go over like the basic anatomy of this. So
let's start with this one.
This number you will see immediately is if you get into a fight, you can discard a card out of your hand, and that gets added to your total power for the fight.
Okay.
So you can opt to just ignore these as actions or missions or what have you, and just throw them into a fight to help you win.
Absolutely.
So that's not bad, and it also keeps literal aces up your sleeve.
And I see what you mean about the narrative focus here, because this card is an action, but it says, I stop an outbreak of a mutated form of the Celestian disease.
Yes, and each card will have some flavor going along with it, and you'll notice each one is related to the planet that is relevant to that. So again, at the beginning of the game, you'll, based on the planets that flip over on the table, you'll pull those card decks out and shuffle them together.
Cool.
So you were telling the story of your universe, which I think is super neat.
I think so as well. What does this card mean?
Sure. So you have to have presence on the planet of Celeste. You spend a command point, and you will need a plant life resource token, which you can get from visiting different planets.
Cool.
And then by spending that cost, you place 2 influence tokens on Celeste and then gain 2 victory points. So without any combat whatsoever, you're able to build up victory points and influence on the planet, which will then give you future victory points should you maintain that control.
Very cool.
Mission cards will give you certain bonuses if you meet certain objectives and triggers. So the trigger for this one is win a battle against a player within 2 spaces of Celeste, but not on the Celeste surface. So you kind of want to show military might for the Celeste planet. You place 1 influence on Celeste and gain 1 victory point. Also take one of the defeated player's unused goods. So this not only gives you a similar benefit of victory points and influence, you also then take stuff from your opponents, which really, like, you definitely want in a 4X game.
Very cool.
Similarly, there's a little bit of pick up and deliver, depending on what cards you get in this game. So
this is giving me shades of Elite Dangerous and
oh man,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with this, you get the pickup for this card by ending movement on Tanlock. You can then get a cargo token, and then you have to deliver that cargo to Arzos, which is another planet that will be on the board. But then when you accomplish this, you place an influence on Tanlock and gain 3 victory points and a random good. So you get a lot of stuff out of this one.
Cool, yeah.
But it does demand that you move around the board, which can be costly.
Sure. That's where one of those wormholes would come in handy.
Absolutely. And this last one I definitely wanted to feature because this is too cool not to talk about.
Here, let's bring that one
for
kind of
sure.
more center
Let's
stage.
forefront this. Ancient Doom device. you know it's cool.
Yeah.
A strange device on the planet has been accidentally activated. The effect: place the Doom token, and you know your game is cool when it has a Doom token. Placed on the victory points tracker. Move it 1 space down each time the active player changes. So basically, at the end of every round.
Sure.
And when it reaches the 5th space, Carlozan is destroyed. An entire planet is just removed.
Just removed from the game? Oh, that could
which
be...
is wild.
Especially if you've been building up influence and then all of a sudden you flip this over. What does this symbol mean?
So this lets you take an action as part of the card action or diplomacy. You may attempt to disable the device. So exactly like you said, if you've been putting a lot of influence on that planet, roll a die, add 1 per unit you have on Carlozan, the planet in focus here. On a 6 up, you gain 2 victory points and place 2 influence on Carlozan and then discard this card. So by moving a bunch of your troops there and risking them being destroyed if you don't finish this in time,
you can get some victory points.
You get a lot out of it.
Absolutely. Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's cut real quick and take a look at one of the player boards.
Absolutely. All right, JayArr, you wanted to talk about the different races represented in this game, because that is you. That is important to know what you, the player, are in this game. I think there's a lot to talk about here, so let's get to it.
Yeah.
So
first off, these are gorgeous, and I want to show off a couple of them because you'll see like a whole bunch of different races that are available. There's like these lava insect guys. There's of course humans, which you gotta have. There's
got robot gargoyle thing. What here? Got a cool psionic guy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of variety here. It's nice. But let's talk about the meat and potatoes here, which is your mechanics. So you've got 4-ish tech trees here.
Okay.
You have cities, bases, and academies.
Right.
And these do a couple things. These red triangles tell you how many credits it will cost to build your next one on the tracker.
Gotcha.
But then when you build this, you'll notice a couple things. It'll increase the cost of the next one. You will have very likely victory points gained for completing these.
Cool.
But then these also, on the top row here, tell you when you refresh your economy, what you gain from it. So by building more cities, you have a larger economy. So at the start, you'll only have 5 credits gained every time, but then it'll go to 6 and to 8. So like you'll be gaining more as you go.
Cool.
Until
and getting more of the important victory points.
Yes. So you'll be getting a lot for completing a full row, but the cost will increase. You can actually decrease this cost by using the research and build actions, which you can spend resources to fill up these spots. The problem is that once you've set a resource type for this row, you have to get the same resource type.
Right. You couldn't use like the
can't mix
plant
and match.
life.
Like that doesn't work. You have to assign it to a different row.
Cool.
So that's a consideration, and it's neat how that's handled.
I really like that. And then I assume that it's sort of so it seems like cities affect your economy.
Bases will affect not only the amount of cards that you get, which are effectively like your actions. We were showing those off earlier. You also get to use the bases as military outlets. You'll notice those actually have a power and die associated with them. So you can use them defensively, or you can actually build them into your ship. And then this affects your world ship, which are those really cool miniatures on the table.
Like that guy.
Yeah, like that guy. In fact, I think you picked the right one for the color. Now, whenever I move my world ship around, it has a base installed on it. It will have its own military power that it brings to the table.
Cool.
So that's nice.
And then let's talk about academies.
Yes, these are super important because these symbols here are command. You spend command to move around the board. You spend command to complete certain cards. You will use it for a number of purposes, so having more of it available to you means you can do more before you have to refresh it. So that's pretty significant. But then last but not least, each race has its own unique little like tech tree.
Yeah.
Only available to it. And these do everything from like gain +2 economy just out of the gate. Your unit limit. So when you go into a fight, you're limited to only your best 3 units on that space. Now you can have 4. But you will notice you need the specific resource type to fill that in.
Right. And then I see there's like a power symbol on there as well.
Yes. So you will also need to spend a card from your hand that has enough power. It could be a standalone card, or you can like combine cards together.
Cool. Very cool.
But again, those get refilled when you do a refresh action. So you still have things available to you every turn.
Absolutely.
And you can always opt to take the refresh when
and then just to kind of show off how it's kind of different. So
yeah,
these guys have like an increase to their unit limit and their cards and economy and stuff.
And then these guys 1 victory point for completed empire card, which are other cards that you get secret objectives for effectively. And then +1 to command.
Cool.
So yeah, each race will play a little differently, which is nice, but the tech trees for the buildings are not super different, so you get a little bit of spice added to each character, but not enough that it feels like a radically different experience.
Right. Which I think is pretty cool, but they all still have like a little more finesse. These guys get more for having done more research on their world ship or on tech stuff, and the legions of Decima here get some like rerolls and a little bit more economic stuff.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know, if I'm playing this game, one of the big draws for me for like a replay of this kind of thing is being able to have a different experience when I come back, and it seems like they really nailed that down with this.
Between the stuff that each race gives you, the way the board could fill out with different planets, I think you're going to get a pretty wildly unique experience every time you play this.
Cool. Well, it sounds like that's a pretty good overview of everything. Let's hop out for the outro.
Sounds good.
Well, that was Empires of the Void 2.
Yes, indeed. This game is pretty hefty, but if you are looking for a mid-range 4X space game, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find something better in that price point.
Yeah, this one feels incredibly satisfying. So this is, it's about 30 minutes per player.
Yes, 2 to 5 players recommended. You can do, recommended ages 13 and up. It's pretty complicated, but I think once you learn the rules, it's not that difficult to play through. Price point is $79.99, which for everything you're getting in the box, I think is a really good deal.
Yeah, holy cow. And also, this was a Kickstarted game, so...
Yes, there is a deluxe version that you could have gotten through the Kickstarter. They are also offering online a deluxe pack, so you can get like metal coins and minis and like all other kinds of cool stuff to improve the game.
Cool, and you guys have seen how amazing these minis are, so I'm JayArr.
I'm Steven from Lair Comics and Fantasy.
And this has been Tabletop Spotlight.
Click to subscribe. Support us on Patreon. Check out more videos. And thanks for watching.